response to Israel's decision to build housing in the eastern parts of Jerusalem, that the Obama administration responded disapprovingly. This is somewhat surprising because many times, certainly in the past, while the U.S. and Israel had different views of the status of East Jerusalem, decisions like this have been made for years since 1967, and generally U.S. administrations did not comment. Now, the whole notion that East Jerusalem is occupied territory, and therefore Israel has to handle it in some kind of special way, is also a very difficult argument to accept. Many of you might remember the British Mandate over Palestine, a League of Nations mandate, which did not establish any different status for Jerusalem as apart to any other. Now, when the United Nations, where the Jewish National Home was supposed to be, decided on dealing with this issue and proposed the partition of Palestine, Jerusalem was envisioned to be, for 10 years, an international city, called in Latin Corpus Separatum. A separate entity. And the UN was going to administer Jerusalem while there was a Jewish state that would be erected and an Arab state that would be erected. Well, what happened to the Corpus Separatum when 5 Arab armies invaded this area? Lift a finger, and who defended this entity that it created? Unfortunately, the UN, the only force that defended Jerusalem back in 1948 when 5 Arab armies invaded this area, were the Jewish underground movements and ultimately the nascent Israel Defense Forces, Tzahal. They defended Jerusalem. We lost the old city to the Jordanians, but we prevented the collapse of the western part of Jerusalem. Now, in 1949, when our first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, had to relate to the status of this Corpus Separatum created by the UN, he basically said, look, as far as Resolution 181 that envisioned the partition and envisioned the Corpus Separatum, those clauses in the UN resolution that deal with Jerusalem are null and void and lost any moral force, because it was only Israel that defended its population. There were 100,000 Jews in Jerusalem at the time. As a result of that, and the reason Israel, in a war of self-defense, captures the eastern parts of Jerusalem in the 1967 Six-Day War, whose territory is it occupying, if it's occupied territory? Now, when the Jordanians came in as Transjordan, that was the previous name of their kingdom, they annexed East Jerusalem. How many countries in the world recognized that there was Jordanian sovereignty in Jerusalem? 1. Not Britain. Britain recognized the annexation of the West Bank. They didn't recognize the annexation of Jerusalem. Only Pakistan. So here was an annexation of an area which they claimed was under Jordanian sovereignty, which was a springboard for attacking Israel. Israel recovers it in a war of self-defense. Can you say that Israel is occupying somebody else's territory? Who did that belong to? Jordan? No. Did it belong to the Corpus Separatum? It was never established. In fact, it failed before it even was set up. And therefore, Israel has a claim to Jerusalem which is stronger than any other claimant. An international legal expert. His name is Stephen Schwebel. Asserted back in 1970 that of all the claimants to Jerusalem, Israel had the strongest claim, above Jordan, above Egypt, above any other group. Now, Schwebel's analysis acquired particular importance in light of the development of his career, because Schwebel then became the legal advisor to the U.S. Department of State, and after that, the president of the International Court of Justice in The Hague. So here was one of the most important sources, legal sources, in international law, basically acknowledging that Israel's claim to Jerusalem was stronger than anybody else. So if this is not occupied territory, it didn't belong to Jordan, it didn't belong to the Corpus Separatum, which never was created, and if Israel's claim is the strongest claim, then it becomes difficult understanding how Israel can be criticized for building in Jerusalem for both its Jewish and Arab residents.